Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Frame.io Live. My name is Sean, and I'm a content producer for Instructional Media. I want to welcome everyone for joining our session today. We are talking about Colorfront. We're talking about color. And we have so much fun stuff to talk about with you today. But I do like to start up my sessions with kind of where everyone's from and where they're chiming in at, and also, like, what would you like to learn about color? It kind of helps us kind of generate more content. We'll have a survey at the end to kind of let you have an opportunity to tell us what you're looking for, so we can build content for you. But for now, say hello. And I'm chiming in from Hollywood, California. It's sunny here, thankfully, because last week we had a bit of a hurricane that happened. But drop in the chat where you're from and say a little hello to us. And we've got some folks on the sidelines as well for Q&A to help kind of answer questions as we go along. We're really excited to talk with Colorfront today because, last week our last session was based on the Lumetri panel, but this week we're talking about Colorfront, and we got a nice demo for you as well as a few other things. But I want to see some folks that pop in. We got some Brazil going in there. Hello, Brazil. Got an NYC. We got someone from the Caribbean. Hello. Give me a couple drinks there. How about that? Trinidad. We've got Vegas. That's actually my hometown. I'll be there this weekend, actually, in Vegas. So, I'm going to go out there and, see some family. We've got New Hampshire. We've got Cleveland. We've got Columbia. We've also got Chicago. This is amazing. Wait for some other ones to pop in, but so glad you're here with us. We are broadcasting live. We are not only on our own watch page where you can view the live content, but we're also on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. So if you're joining us from those other sources, I know LinkedIn's a little wonky with the questions. It'll allow us to see your responses, but we won't be able to or your questions, but we won't be able to respond to you directly in the chat. So if you do want to join us on YouTube, you can absolutely do that. You can head over to our Frame.io channel on YouTube, and it should be the most current live event that's on there. But yeah, got a couple other folks. Got some Canada, another Vegas. Hello. We got London. You guys are popping in. Philippines, Kenya. We got so many people from all over the world, and I just want to say thank you so much for jumping in. And we're really excited to get going. I don't want to stall up and take up too much time, but let's go ahead and get started. So as I mentioned before, this is our second live color event. We're bringing out a whole series. We want to bring color to you, and we're kind of going through all the avenues to bring you as much content as we can related around color, because I think color is a really important aspect of video, and not a lot of people understand all the fundamentals of it. So in our last session, we did cover a lot of basics, and then we also had Ray, our colorist from our Pod Squad team, talk about the Premiere Pro Lumetri color panel. So that recording is up on our YouTube page, and our chat folks will be able to give you that link directly to it if you'd like. But we were able to show you how to approach color on a few clips, and then how to layer those properly using that Lumetri color panel. And again, if you missed that session, we're going to link that out to you. But today, we're going to re-explore some color grading fundamentals from our guest at Colorfront, Brandon Heaslip. And we will get an in-depth demo. Try and say that 10 times fast. In-depth demo. See, I just did it. Of Colorfront's On-Set Dailies application. And by the end of this session, you should effectively have some basic understanding of color fundamentals, as well as being able to use the On-Set Dailies process flow with the Frame.io integration in order to make your workflow more streamlined and organized. Now, to help drive this session, I have invited Ray to join us once again, our Prod Squad colorist and finishing editor, to join us along with Colorfront. So again, we're going to be talking about color grading essentials in Colorfront, but I want to give you a few bullet points of what we're going to be talking about. Since we are going live, I do kind of like to talk a little bit about what Frame.io is, because there may be folks kind of hopping into the session and have no idea what Frame.io does and how it works with the rest of the ecosystem we have here. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Frame, but then we're going to jump right into basic color theory and color schemes, and also go into color correction versus color grading. There's a defined line and a difference between that. So, Brandon's got a few examples on the difference of those two things, and also a color workflow, the best way to kind of make this workflow sort of happen. And then a big one, scene deferred or referred versus display referred. So this is basically how your footage will look, as you're shooting it, and the perception you have at that time of what your footage is as it comes in, versus how it would look on various displays and how you would actually see it with your human eye, and how you can kind of find that difference in the color flow. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the Colorfront engine. There's a specific flow that they recommend for a lot of their users, especially when they're working within their applications. So this is actually a specific Colorfront engine workflow that they have within On-Set Dailies. And then, of course, we're going to have a demo with that as well, and then move on to Q&A, because we want to be able to answer these questions as we go. Now, like I said, there are Q&A folks in the sidelines. So if you do have any side questions to pop in, they will try and answer those. But if they don't get answered, more than likely, we're going to queue those up for the end and have some time to answer your questions. But without further ado, what is Frame.io? Well, in essence, Frame.io is your central collaboration tool for all of your creative assets. You're able to manually upload your photos and videos, as well as other documents that you may have to work with your production. So that goes for documents, maybe project files, anything that's associated with making this process happen, whatever project you're working on. Frame.io is the way to do that. And it's one unified space where they can access this media, but also be able to leave comments and annotations on different assets. And it's available for wherever you are on the go. So obviously we have a real robust web app, but we also have an iOS app available for both iPhone and iPad. And then for our enterprise users, we also have Apple TV app. Now, much like last color session, we talked about the Lumetri panel. Well, inside of Premiere, we have an integration with Frame.io, or they have an integration with us inside of Premiere and After Effects, to where you can actually interact with Frame.io directly inside of that application. But we also support Final Cut Pro, Resolve as well. So we have integrations with those two other applications to make your process nice and easy. We've also got some camera to cloud options as well, which I'm not going to cover too much here at the beginning, but as we go along, that may come up in our discussion. Now, as we go further, I want to introduce our two other guests here. We've got Ray, who is our colorist and finishing editor. We also have Brandon from Colorfront. I'm going to bring them out here to say hello. Hello, y'all. Welcome to the program.
Hey, how are you?
Good. So we're going to talk some color today. Are you guys ready to kind of jump into this magic? I don't want to stall too much. I'm sure our audience is eager to kind of get going, but any initial thoughts that you want to talk about before we get started?
Absolutely. This is an exciting concept. It's color and finishing is one of the most important parts of the process, especially now in the digital age where we have to work with different cameras and different capturing formats. And we're going to dive into it with Brandon into Colorfront and how we can manage our color workflows.
Yeah, and definitely looking forward to any questions and kind of, showing the larger audience of some of the capabilities that Colorfront brings to the table that you might not find in other solutions, but how that can work seamlessly with Frame.io and the entire color pipeline that you might work on, whether it's an independent film all the way to a documentary, to a wedding, to the largest blockbuster movies in the world, and the tools are kind of available for all.
Well, I love hearing it, and I'm very excited for you to hop on, Brandon. We can't thank you enough for taking some time to show us all the knowledge that you have about Colorfront and color altogether. And then Ray, of course, I always love when you come onto this program and talk color, because I think color is amazing. But without further ado, let's go ahead and jump forward. I'll jump out of the way and let you guys do your magic. Be back momentarily.
All right, Ray, do you want to kick off? Kind of summarize where you
Sure,
where you finished on the last session, and then we'll kind of kick right into things.
Absolutely. Yeah, we covered some. I covered some of the basic color theory pertaining to film and video and display technologies on the last session. So this session, I think Brandon is going to also brush up on the same concepts again. But I think it's very important to basically start from the basics. And have a fundamental understanding of it. Even if we know it, it's always good to be reminded of it. So I'll let Brandon sort of go through this whole color theory and get started on that.
Get going. So just a basic reminder for those who don't know or didn't see the last session. Here's just some basic color theory. We're not going to get into the weeds on it, but you've got your primary colors. Everyone knows those: the RGB, your cyan, your yellow, magenta. And so that's the basic primary colors that we're all used to working with. And basically, they're just guidelines for what you might be starting off with. Then you've got things like complementary colors. Again, the picture kind of sums it all up. The complementary colors are, of course, you can combine them to make white, gray, or black, depending on how many of those colors you want to mix together. And that's kind of like the basics of the color theory that you want to kind of build upon, going into, the next section of thing, which is the schemes. So you've got the various schemes. If you pop to the next slide for me there we go. I jumped ahead. I went to the schemes before other basic color theory. So you've got hue. This is what color is. And as you can see, you've got, on the bottom right-hand corner, you've got a red, it goes over to purple and blue and greens and yellows. That's the hue. That's what the color actually is. Saturation is the intensity of the color. So that color that you see under saturation, it's the same color. It's just how intense the saturation is. And it can go from, it would be, taking something from fully colored, take all the saturation out of it, you more or less get a black and white image because you've taken all the intensity of the colors out. And then tint, shade, and brightness is how bright or dark the color is. So again, you're looking at the same color, but the tint, the shade, or the brightness defines how bright it appears and what that color ends up looking like. And this is just, some basic, tool set that you should learn when you're doing color correction, whether, again, super basic or getting into the more detailed things when you see your favorite movie or a documentary. These are definitely some of the tools that colorists and the creative directors have used in the process to make their movie. Then if we go to the next one, you've got your harmonies or your color schemes. And so these are palettes, basically, if you want to think of it like that. You're a painter and you've got one of those little things and you've got the paint on it. But there's multiple, and this is just some of them. There are many, I think there's like 7 color harmonies and color schemes. So you got monochromatic, that's a single color, as you can see. Then you've got analogous, I always say that word wrong. Colors, which is the ones that are next to each other. So as you can see, it shifts over these, so that you play those 3 together kind of in almost like a trifecta, or you can go even more. And then again, you've got your complementary colors, which are opposite to each other. So you've got your green, which is across from the red. You've got orange across from blue, purple across from yellow, and you'd be mixing these in a way to create a look or a feel in your movie. Again, pretty top level stuff. The internet is your friend with these things. And then I know that Ray got into some of this in his previous session. So there's definitely a lot of details that you can kind of get into it. And then we jump into color correction versus color grading. So Ray and I were talking about this when we first started to talk about this entire session. And when I brought this up, it was almost like a light bulb went off a little bit with Ray. He's like, "Oh my God, that's a totally amazing."
100%. And I think this is one of the most important things that I didn't talk about in the last session. And I think this is very important because these two, even though related, they're cousins, but it's related in a way that each step is different. And so this is a great slide, great example. And I think I'm going to let you go through it. I think our audience are going to enjoy this one.
Yeah. So, with color correction versus grading, one of the thing is, color correction is you're matching your shots, right? You're out on set or you've shot something and you're matching yesterday to today, right? Or you're taking a close up and matching it with a wide shot, right? So that's correcting it. You're getting it to a base image that looks pretty out the gate. This is something that the Colorfront engine does automatically when you use it. By base, it's going to give you a very pretty picture out the gate. So you know kind of what you're working with, whether it's the exposure, if you need to reshoot something or whatever it might be. And that's the correction. So you're getting, camera A and camera B to look the same. So you're correcting them, balancing them. Okay, here's my starting point. And then you get into the grading side. And the grading side is where the colorists, the look, the feel, everything that they're trying to convey in the imagery comes into play. So on the left, you've got an image where it's just a standard 709 Colorfront engine out the box. So originally that file was an Alexa 35 file, and then this is in 709. I'm definitely not a colorist. Don't ever claim to be one. And so on the right hand side, you've got the color grading section. And all I did was I just tweaked a couple things to kind of give it a different look or a feel. So on the left hand side, I shot it. It looks great. It's beautiful. It's warm. But then in the process of telling the story, we needed to kind of change the feel of it, that it was more moody, or it was more of a serious scene. And so we shot it with normal sunlight, and we needed to change it to a more cool, darker feeling because of the subject matter potentially. Or I could go the opposite direction and make it look like Barbie, right? Like that's where the color grading comes into effect, and that's where the colorists and their team kind of shine when it comes to the entire pipeline. And we definitely feel that those are the two. That's the big thing when you're looking at how you're going to work. There's the out the gate, you're on set, you're seeing it, but don't worry, as long as you've exposed it properly and you framed it the way you want, you got the actor's performance out of it, you can change it with grading to kind of make that feel. So you don't necessarily need to, it's great to light it the way you want it, of course, but you do have the ability to kind of change that after the fact. And that's a big part of the puzzle.
100%. That's a great summary of the difference between the two.
And so, now, we're going to kind of get into the components of the workflow, depending on what the camera format is, whether it's a Canon or a Red or a Sony, an Alexa, whatever it might be, your favorite Nikon camera. It all starts with the input transform. So this is also known as an IDT, if you're talking about like an ACES pipeline or a standard camera pipeline. And this input transform is basically, I know that this is a Sony, and I'm going to translate this into a working color space that I can then do my color grading, color correction, kind of all in that same piece. So I'm going to come in, and what it allows you to do is I can shoot on a Red camera and an Alexa camera at the same time, 2 different angles, but I can get them into the same grading space. So I can actually manipulate the colors. And when I tweak Red, it tweaks Red the same way on the Sony as it would on, say, an Alexa, because we brought them into a bigger space from the original camera source. And then inside the color grading components, there's a lot of things in the grade portion. One is the CDL, so the color decision list. It's an ASC specification that's been around now for about 14 years, I think, plus or minus. Don't quote me on that one. It might be a little bit longer. And then you've got your primary color grade tools. You've got your secondaries. So if you're going to do power windows, if you're going to do tracking, if you're going to do things like that, that's the next portion of it. And then you've got your LMT, which is your look management tool. And so a look management can be a LUT. It can be like a show LUT. So you'd work with your post team or your colorist to create a look. And many shows have multiple looks, right? You're going to have your daytime, you're going to have your outside, you're going to have your tungsten, you're going to have your different feels for the show. And that's where the look comes into it. And then we also in the Colorfront engine have the ability to actually kind of mix and match and create your own look tool on your own. But you can also do this in Premiere. You can use Lumicolor and create something. And if you make it a LUT and you like it, that technically can be an LMT in the pipeline, because it's just part of what you're physically looking at. Then the next step in the pipeline is your look library, or RRT. So this is something that you can get from outside sources that you can use to create a look. You can add things to the entire puzzle. And then the final component is your ODT, or output transform, or output display transform. And this one's really important. And for many of you out there, you've got your SDR, HDR. Those are the two main output transforms that most people think of today, right? So your home television is either typically at this point an HDR capable television. It doesn't mean that you're seeing HDR all the time. The majority of people still do visualize everything in SDR, and that's what we're going to be demoing today, is showing SDR. And then kind of showing how the Colorfront engine can help you go to HDR without changing much of your color pipeline. So the ODT is where you take everything inside up before it and get it to the display, whether it's an iPad, an LG display, a Sony X310, if you're in a broadcast finishing kind of situation, and that's where the ODT lies. And everything before that is visible on the ODT section of the color pipeline. And yeah, there's just a lot of, I'll show it in the demo. There's a lot of things that you can do kind of in between the input and the output transform to help create your look. This is the big one. You've got scene referred and you've got display referred. Hopefully the two images kind of show, again, Ray and I, when I sent them this slide, they were like, this is great, because it kind of visualizes a very big part of the pipeline that people don't necessarily know about or fully have an understanding of. And so on the left, you've got your scene referred. So that's what it looks like on the sensor, what your negative looks like. It's the scene referred, it's on the film, as you'd call it. And so it's the direct relationship of the scene falling on the sensor, right? Whether that's film, which I don't think many of you are shooting film. I think there's like 3 people in the world still shooting film on the movie side. But whether it's an Alexa or a Red, it's what is falling on the physical sensor. There's no artistic manipulation to the data, and it's not displayable in a meaningful way. Like, as you can see on the left-hand side, you're looking at Marcy. It doesn't look too pretty, but that's just what it looks like on the sensor. And then the image is modified based on what is seen on the reference display. So the ODT, or it's also known as an OOTF. And basically that's the analog to digital. So what it looks like on scene referred, on say a negative and analog, as even though it's digital, and how it translates to being on an electrical display, which is your television. So it's there's a lot of different things for it. There's an OTF that's doing the opposite. That's going from display back to scene referred. So don't confuse OOTF with OTF. If you Google OOTF, you find a lot of things, but it's an optical transfer function. And it's also called the rendered intent, the look, the show LUT. It's not just one thing. It's a portion of the pipeline. Then you get to the display referred, and as you can see, Marcy looks, normal. She's in 709. It's a representable picture that you and our eyes all look and say, oh, she looks normal, looks great. This is the direct relation of the light emitted to the display. So you're actually seeing, again, the ODT, what it looks like on the display, no matter what that display might be. Again, it could be an iPhone, it could be an Android, it could be an iPad, it could be your LG. That's where that sits. It's no longer related to the scene referred at the beginning, because it's on the output side. And then the most cases it's irreversible, and then the viewing environment is also quantified, which just means it defines what you're looking at it on. So that's one thing when you're working. I always say when you're shooting, if you make sure it's exposed right, everything down the road is going to work out really well for you, and gives you the most latitude that you possibly deal with when it comes to finishing or even doing dailies on your show. And that's one of the big pieces of the puzzle that I don't think most people have ever seen a slide kind of define.
Yeah, and I think this is a great slide because, again, it shows you on one side, that's your capturing format. So whatever you have on the scene referred is designed for capturing as much information as possible, and it's not ready to be displayed. And it's just a great example of like simplifying in one slide, and it goes through a process. And then now you have an output, which is now ready to be displayed properly. That's what I love about this. And the last time we talked about this, I'm like, this is a great slide because it just summarizes this like intense process, because there's a lot going on, right? And then all of a sudden you have, but I think it's a great example, and you just explained it beautifully. It just goes from capture to display, and those things are because all the log formats that we deal with, and people put it on their monitor, it looks all washed out. That's your scene referred, and then all of a sudden you have this on the right, which is once you put a proper transform on it, that's the pretty image that you're supposed to be getting. Amazing.
All right, so now we're going to kind of get into a little bit of how Colorfront looks at the pipeline. One of the big things that we've been saying for a pretty long time is the single master approach. And so when you're looking at this, you've got your input on the left and you've got your display on the right? So we're taking the color pipeline and kind of simplifying it in a single slide. You've got your log C, your VariCam, your Cinema DNG, your Blackmagic on the right hand side or left hand side, sorry. But your input could also be an HDR file. It can also be in 709. Like say you're shooting on your iPhone and you're in the HLG mode, right? So that's an input that can be used that a lot of people don't necessarily think about. Then you go into OSD or transcoder or any of our other products, and it allows you to go out to a variety of different display devices, right? So your SDR televisions, your HDR10, your Dolby Vision, your Dolby Cinemas, all these different display devices. So how we see it is there is a single master approach to it. So if you kind of start with the biggest thing possible, which is your log captured image, right? It's a log, you've exposed it properly, you've got all the latitude you possibly can have with it. You could bring it into OSD, which we'll demo, and kind of use the tools to manipulate it. But then on the very end, we can actually use what we'll cover in the next couple slides is the Colorfront engine and our perceptual remapping to deliver all of the different color deliverables for your ODTs without having to change the color in front of it. You don't need to necessarily go in and tweak things just to get it to look good or match on a say an HDR display versus a SDR display. It's a single way of thinking that know that your looks and your color can all be used in your final deliverables, no matter what the ODT or the delivery space is.
And Brandon, would you mind reminding the audience what OSD stands for those who
OSD stands for On-Set Dailies. Sorry, thank you for reminding me. I work for Colorfront, so I know what it means. OSD stands for On-Set Dailies. We have another product also. It's called Express Dailies. So it's known as EXD. OSD is the industry leading daily software out there. All your major feature films are done with OSD. And then one of the things just to briefly touch on is the word dailies. Like, what does that mean? I think it means a lot to a lot of people. If you talk to a producer, dailies means I'm watching it on Frame.io on my iPad. If you talk to an editor, it's my ProRes file that's inside my Premiere project. Or if you talk to a VFX supervisor, it's a QuickTime that was made referencing something else. They just see it as dailies, but it's it just means a lot of things. Dailies historically used to take days or day. Now it's more minutelies, especially with the camera to cloud pipeline that Frame.io and the team there have designed with things like Teradek, where you can shoot, you can have your look kind of on the fly put into an HEVC. And it's uploaded to the cloud, and then you kind of have a version of dailies that you can start to work with, or you can upload log, which we'll demonstrate. You can upload a log file to Frame.io and do your dailies that way. So it's just one of those things to kind of help define. There is no wrong type of defining it, but just so you know, when I say dailies, I'm typically talking about delivering to editorial. That's where dailies is, but part of that is your producer wants to see something, as quickly as possible, or your studio or your whoever's paying for the movie. They're like, hey, what am I paying for? That's where the dailies kind of pops into the pipeline.
Great.
Now we're gonna get right into the Colorfront engine, and as you can see, the pipeline is the same that we had already talked about earlier. We added Frame.io as the media input. So I referenced we have worked for a couple of years now with Frame.io to support their color to cloud initiative, and so we have direct access built into On-Set Dailies and Express Dailies to read directly from your Frame.io project. So you can do all your pipeline on set, you can do everything in your Frame.io project, and then we built the hooks into Frame.io. So when I open up On-Set Dailies, I'm actually accessing my Frame.io project in Frame.io from my local system, and I could be anywhere in the world and connect to the project to start working on the media. Then you've got your input transform, then you've got your creative color grade, your look. And then what's new on this timeline of this slide is the perceptual transform. And so it gives you a couple of additional tools for brightness, surround color, and primary constraints. The perceptual model, I'll get a little bit into the next slide, but what the perceptual model is how our eyes see the world. So it's how our eyes visualize everything. And so we at Colorfront, headed by our CTO and Chief Color Scientist, Bill Feitner, have developed what is called the Colorfront engine. And this allows you to take all those inputs into these different output spaces using the Colorfront engine with a perceptual model to actually map things to larger and or smaller or different color spaces on the fly without having to change everything before that. And then again, you get into your output transforms. As you can see, you've got the EOTF for your display. You've got your primaries, your display referred, your HDR, and your SDR. So one of the big toolkits that we have developed over the years is the engine. It's available in things like the HAA, FSHDR, and Colorbox. There's support for the Colorfront engine with those tools via POM4 LiveGrade. So you can actually use this pipeline from beginning to end, so you can deliver the best outputs possible. Now getting into the next slide for me there. What is a perceptual transform? Not to get too into the science of it, and I'd probably not get it completely right. Bill would want me to say absolutely everything because he's very proud of it, and so are we at Colorfront. But basically, a perceptual transform integrates the various perceptual phenomenons into a model in linear transform space. And so it's a linear transfer to go, say, from SDR to HDR. All transforms for the various deliverables are calculated in that space. So we do all the math inside this space. So it's seamless to you as the end user. It's all done automatically. You just set your settings and we're doing all the hard work for you. The display dynamic range, surround illumination, color volume are all accounted for, which I'll show in the demo, and it'll kind of make a little bit more sense than just reading the text on what a perceptual transform is. And the biggest, most important part about the Colorfront engine and the perceptual transform is the creative intent remains the same. When you go from, say, SDR and say you're a filmmaker, you've delivered your SDR and then you sold it to someone else and they're like, oh, I want an HDR version of this. You can seamlessly go from SDR to HDR with the Colorfront engine without having to do a full color pass in HDR, and spending all the time and money having to redo that. And I know a lot of you are probably independent filmmakers, and the budget and the time to do that tends to be, a big constraint. But what we can do is, with the Colorfront engine, you can go from, say, SDR to HDR, and the intent is the same, right? The colors shouldn't shift. Ray should look the same color he is. It's just because it's an HDR doesn't mean like his black T-shirt becomes, a different shade of black. It's the same color. The purple light that he has in the background is the same thing. It's just how we perceive it with our eyesight. And so the intent and what you spent all that time color correcting shouldn't change just because you're going into something like an HDR color space.
Great. Brandon, just to, as a question, so is it safe to say that, because, everything we do on the actual computer side of things, everything happens mathematically, right? So just so that, I think it's, the question is like, when you do the math correctly, that means the math is done correctly, all the numbers check out. It's something that we've kind of noticed on some of the displays that the picture may not be looking to us exactly the same as we kind of want it to, like we kind of we're used to perceiving it. And I think this is where this perceptual transform, I believe, comes into play, right? To make sure that we're perceiving it. The math may be correct, like all the things may check out, but we may also have some visual discrepancies for the way human eye perceives it, right?
Exactly. And that's one of the things that when you get into things like colorfulness, you get into the surrounding areas, is one of the things that, as things get brighter, we perceive them as more colorful. It's not that the color is really changing. It's just as it gets brighter, the way we perceive it. So it's a lot more than just doing, like you said, just the math, right? There is, if I just did a straight A to B, it's gonna mathematically get there, but there has to be a transform to actually calculate for the fact that our eyes do perceive things differently on the fly. So you could put them side by side, your SDR and HDR, and you could look at it and go, oh, okay, I see a little bit more shadow detail. Well, you should, because we're expanding the volume, we're expanding what you're able to do. But the all we're exposing is, say, more detail in the blacks because we're opening up that visible space, but it's not changing what was there originally. It's still
it's kind of like accounting for the human element, I guess,
exactly.
in this sense, if
100%.
that makes sense. Yeah, that's just that's one of the important parts about this, because we end up like some of these trims when we master one project, you want to deliver different formats. One of the things that we end up like spending a lot of time on it is actually that making it visually, match, even though the math is done correctly. So amazing.
All right, so now I'm gonna share my screen from my other system, and hopefully everybody will be able to see it, and we'll kind of get into doing the demo. So here we go. I'm not going to get too into the weeds. I definitely want to get to the Q&A and getting your questions answered. But this is the
actually,
interface.
Brandon, before you get going, I do want to throw it to audience. If you do have questions, please throw those in. We want to sideline those and get those ready for our Q&A section, because we're going to jump into that right after the demo. Anyway, sorry to interrupt, Brandon.
No, thank you. Yeah, any questions are welcome. And we also have somebody else standing by to answer your questions on the fly as well. And so what you're looking at here is the interface of OSD. I've kind of opened up some of the windows to kind of lay things out. But the first things first, what I did to set this project up is I created a new project. I don't need to take you guys through that. And then basically I just go to this Frame.io login option. Sorry, it's hard to see. The font's as big as I can get it. But it says Frame.io login. When I click on that, it's going to bring up my authentication into Frame.io. You're going to use your email and your password that it is for Frame.io. And then we're going to successfully log in. It's going to bring up another window that says, hey, you're allowing us to physically connect to your Frame.io project. You allow that, and then you should have access to your Frame.io project media. And so that's one of the seamless things that just kind of happens in the background. There's nothing you have to physically do. All the security and all the maintenance is handled by Frame.io and their team. So it's a very seamless interface for you and your team. And so what we're looking at here is some red footage. It was originally shot. I forgot where Dan shot this stuff, but it's absolutely beautiful footage. And then what you're looking at really quick is just the straight color correction side of things, right? So here is just a pretty image of, balanced across. This one's a little bit different because it was shot into the sun, but there's a balanced look kind of across these two shots. It's the, one's a little bit brighter, but I can modify that on the exposure side of things. But what you're looking at is, you've got your viewer. So this is the viewing file and what you're seeing. And this is inside my Frame.io project. I'm reading it directly. I'm not doing anything other than just accessing the media. You've got your color grade wheels on the right-hand side. And then you've got your analyzer tool, which is a scope. So you can actually see what you're doing and what the image looks like. And then across the bottom, you've got your kind of timeline setup of the shots that I have loaded. And so if I go into our node tree, so this is the color, this is the essence of the Colorfront and your color pipeline and how things kind of work. So the very first thing you see is your red node. And so red is the debayer, right? Because red is a file that needs to be debayered. It's say different than like an HEVC, because HEVCs are already one color typically. So you don't need to debayer them. They're already ready to play back and go. Where red, you need to debayer it from the sensor with the color, the gamma. And it's got all the tools that are inside, say Red Cine X for modifying chroma noise and pixel flashing and brightness. But all this is read directly from the metadata of the file itself. So we do this automatically based on the metadata inside the original red file. So this is all automatic when you build a pipeline. We've got our reframe node, right? So if it's originally an 8K, or this was originally a UHD HEVC, or a movie file, in a different size, you can do a simple reframe, right? So I can zoom in, as you see on the right hand side, or if I go back here, I can zoom in, so you can actually zoom and crop and do different things. If this was shot, on a 1:3 lens, of course, this is going to look right, but the idea is it's all based on the metadata, and we can auto apply this for your dailies. Then you've got your IDT. So this is the red wide gamut. This is an ACES pipeline. I forgot to mention, got ahead of myself there. But here's your IDT, and there's a long list of IDTs that are made by the manufacturers and are used to take your input, convert it into that open space to start color grading. Then you've got your ACES CDL. And so we're in ACES CCT, but I can also change what grading space I'm in. So that's the volume or the grading space that you're turning the knobs in. So when I adjust green, it's adjusting green. And as you see on the image, again, Apologies for all the colorists out there that are kind of freaking out. I can go over here. I can change the dials. I don't have my tangent panel hooked up, but lots of dailies colorists tend to have a tangent panel or a panel to control the knobs as they're going. And so I can come in here and actually kind of create my CDL. Then I get into where the Colorfront engine in this pipeline comes in. If I was to take the CF LMT, which is the Colorfront LMT, out of this pipeline, it would be a standard ACES pipeline without the Colorfront engine. This one has the Colorfront engine embedded as part of it. It is ACES compliant, so you can actually use this fully fledged on your ACES pipeline. We have the ability to reverse the ODT. If you wanted to, but right now, just for the demo, we're going to be following it. So I'm following this, which is your RRT and your ODT. So again, the display referred color space, which is why the image looks good. And then we have tools like burn-in. We also have gradients, lens distortions, vignetting. We've got, masking tools, all these tools that are in addition to for the end users to use. For dailies, typically, they're not always used, right? Most people aren't doing secondaries or masking on their dailies, but there are some that do. And so we provide those tools for those who want to use them. Then we get back to, I just want to kind of show you some of the tools. Then we get into the CF LMT. And so one of the things that's really great about the Colorfront Engine's LMT node is you can create your own look. And inside of it, we've got this look 1 and look 2. And so if I click on this, we've got a bunch of different looks that are embedded inside the software, such as anything with master or master look bright or low con or soft color. These were all developed by Colorfront by Bill Feitner. Then we've got your film stocks, your Kodachrome, you've got your bleach bypass, you've got the Arri K1S1, you've got all these things, and you can kind of make your own look on the footage. And so I can come in here and say, I want to have Etchachrome with master pastel, and then I could blend these two. It's hard to see, but if you see on the scope, you see it's kind of moving as I'm blending these. So I can actually make my own kind of look for the shot. And that's part of that's where the grading comes into it. This is the very important part of it. And this could be, if you wanted to do something like a LUT or a CLF pipeline, this is something where the look comes in. But we also have a lot of really great tools where here in this is an exposure tool. And so say you went out and you shot this and it's zeroed out. So I'll reset this guy back to default. This is what it looked like. And I just felt, it was actually this shot before the show started that we were looking at. It kind of felt a little bit overexposed. It's like, oh, there's too much going on in here. I can come in here and I can actually just modify this by, say, half a stop. Or I can go, down 3 stops. What this is doing is it's as if I went into the camera and turned the iris up or down. That's it's where it's modifying it is at that level where you're actually as if I'm in front of the lens doing that kind of adjustment. So this is the default. I was like, ooh, that's too much. I'm just going to bring it down a little bit. It was a little too high. Didn't like the way it looked. And that's a great tool. Then I've got the color temperature, so I can actually again start to grade my film, and I can actually change the look color temperature. I can go super warm. Doesn't look warm where she is, so I want to make it a little bit cooler to kind of emphasize what that is, and then you can modify the tint. Don't want her to look too green, so I'm going to pull some warmth back into her face and the image. Then you've got these 3 here, which are really, really important when it comes to where you're going to go if you're going to go into the HDR kind of dailies pipeline. This is SDR, right? So that's the main focus. But these tools for ambient, surround, and for colorfulness and for HDR mount, sorry. And so colorfulness is also known as the hunt effect. And that is the effect that as things get brighter, we will see things as more colorful. So if I was to get this really, really bright and go into an HDR kind of workflow and pipeline, I can modify the colorfulness for how much color, and it's subtle. It's not like it's going to dramatically change the world in the way it looks, but it is applying for that. Then you've got your HDR amount, which is the actual brightness. And so what that is used to compensate for is kind of like your overall brightness. And you see on the scope, it's kind of raising the high end up or all the way down. And again, this is more for HDR toolkits and HDR deliverables. And then you've got your ambient surround, and that's based on the brightness of the room. So if I'm going to deliver to a baseball stadium, which is outside, it's super bright. Okay, that might be a bit much, but say a trade show, or you're, compensating for the fact that everyone at home doesn't have 18% gray painted walls, and you have to, darken things or adjust for the fact of how bright the room is. And that's what the ambient surround is for. So for a very, very dark room, or say Dolby Cinema, you would want to pull that down because you're adjusting for the fact that our eyes are made for dark colors. So we see a lot more detail in the blacks than say we do in the highlights. And so you can kind of adjust for this on the fly based on your deliverable. Again, that's more of an HDR style pipeline. But here I am, and just by clicking some buttons and mixing these things, I'm getting these different looks. I want some bleach bypass mixed with master broadcast. So we give you the tools to kind of do this yourself. And then you can even publish a CLF to deliver to other software that support that. And then one of the most powerful tools, so say you've created your looks, you've got everything up and running, I can come into our render page. And one of the things I can do is I can go to HEVC, and it's down here on the bottom. I got to move my thing. Where'd it go? Oh, nope, sorry, it was web. I've got my Frame.io UHD HEVC, Frame.io HD HEVC, and Frame.io H.264. If I was to select this, I can go in here, and on the right-hand side, I know it's hard to see, sorry, everybody, it does say FIO IBC 2023 with the file name. And it's going to, what's going to happen is when I go to render this, which I won't do for time, so we can get into the Q&A portion of things. When we render those HEVCs, we're going to render them and then push them directly back into your Frame.io project as a version file. So these came in as a log file. So either a red log, the not pretty picture, the scene referred data that we kept referencing earlier today. And so it's going to be, there's going to be your version 1, which is your original log, and then we can put this right back in on top of it as a version 2, which is your SDR, master. So your producer can watch the SDR version. And if you wanted to deliver an HDR version, we could also do that, where you'd render out an HDR and an SDR simultaneously. We can actually do a lot of renders simultaneously. If I was to actually duplicate this tool really quick, so I've got 2 RRTs, I can come in here and I can change this output to say PQ 2020 1000 nits. I can make a different result. The image on the right-hand side on the bottom looks washed out. It's because it's actually an HDR image. And so on my computer, I could modify that to make it look right, but then the SDR is going to look weird, which I can do really quickly. But that's the idea, is that's why it looks a little bit washed out, because we're not monitoring for HDR right now. But then what I could do is I could come to my render page and I can have my SDR deliverable and my HDR simultaneously going back to your Frame.io project, and then your producer can watch whatever the version that they want to watch or you would like to create. And then I can also go in and say, editorials in SDR. I'm going to come through here, and we're going to be doing our project in Premiere. So I'm going to go, let's go with ProRes, HQ 1920 by 1080. We're fully licensed for Apple, so these are full legit ProRes files, and so you can deliver a very high quality, lightweight file to say something like Ray, and he can jump in and start editing and getting things going. And so here we are delivering 3 different types of dailies. And again, going back to where I was earlier, dailies means a lot of things to a lot of people. And if I can, say they wanted to say you were doing something in Avid, we also have deliverables for Avid. We have deliverables for ProRes. We've got, broadcast, Apple devices. We got a whole bunch of presets. But when it comes to the Frame.io workflow, there's nothing more seamless than just rendering it directly back to your Frame.io project, opening everything up and getting going. And I think that's one of the most powerful tools. But what we can do here is I don't need to change my look, right? I'm not changing what I don't have to come in here and reduplicate these and create a different look for my HDR deliverable. I just change the back end of it, and you get a beautiful image because we're using the perceptual remap engine inside Colorfront. And so, yeah, that's about as quick of a not too crazy technical layout demo that we can kind of get into. I didn't know if there's any immediate questions with the GUI up that Ray, that you've seen that we should address or want to talk about.
It's great. I mean, I have a lot of questions myself as well. So for example, like when you create that look and you have different, looks, LUTs, or, that look management node, when you combine the two, do you have options of what format of LUTs, if you want to export that look and put it back on set or something, and so they can use it for monitoring the shots on camera or something? Do you have options to export it in different formats, or is it just CFL?
Yeah, no. So we can definitely output like a LUT for that. So if I did, there's a shortcut for it. But when you go to output it, we output a cube, we output a mesh, we output, so there are ways to output a LUT in order to say, throw that in the camera, right? This is what I want it to look like. It's all combined, and I can put that in line with whatever the tool is that you might be using, whether it's a Flanders box or the color box. You can put the LUT in there and work seamlessly between the Colorfront Dailies pipeline and what you're seeing on set.
And then same thing for CDLs, right? Can we export just CDL information? And
you can, yeah. So CDL, for those who don't know, is basically 10 numbers. It's your master, your gain, your offset, your slope, and your saturation. So it's 9 numbers. They're not the most prettiest text files in the history of time, but yeah, CDLs are very commonly used and shared and done on shows because I might have my look. Right. So I've created my look, but I need to modify that on the fly. That's where the CDL comes into play.
Right. What about VFX pipelines? So how do you work with, VFX, for example, right? So let's say we're on set, we want to send something to VFX, or we have some information. How do we exchange that information, metadata wise, or things like that?
Typically for VFX, we obviously have our transcoder tool, which is part of the VFX pipeline for many companies. Most of the time, they're getting a scene referred image. They're getting an EXR, and then they're applying the color pipeline that you have sent them, whether it's a CDL or the ACES pipeline. And typically they're just getting like a QuickTime movie as a reference. That tends to be a very common, or an H.264, right? So the CDLs go. One of the things with CDLs, and I think many DIT friends of mine who I used to live with and die with, get frustrated because most of the time they throw the CDLs out and they're not actually used. And so it ends up being kind of a reference for finishing to use. So it is transportable and you can move things around, but lots of the time they end up kind of with VFX going as not as plain as possible, but as plain as possible, right? They don't want to have too much of a look involved in it. They want to get it into, say, 709. They want to do their VFX and deliver that, and then let the colorist and the team and the director and the DP
do their work. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just they want to work in they want to have all the information possible as well for VFX.
Exactly.
And again, like I think this demonstrates just as an overall comment that why you want to use a more color specific pipeline like OSD, because on set you may need to deliver certain different formats. You may have a dailies colorist on standby or doing your work on set, because everything's connected these days. We do a lot of camera to cloud shoots and you have access to the information. So I feel like this clearly, exemplifies why you want to use a system like this that's more, designed for delivering all the different formats without having to go back and retrim, as we call it in the color world, for each different set of deliverable.
Exactly, and that's the big thing, right? Is there's a lot of work, and everyone's working faster and lighter. And with the toolkit, you're able to kind of, like you said, move that along as quickly as possible. And one of the things is, like, once I've created a look, right? Say I've got that whole reel, like the whole roll, right? That's A001. I can set my look, apply that to the entire camera roll, right? If I know that's what I want it to look like, I can simply apply that and render, right? So it's about turning things over as quickly as possible. And that's one of the biggest things that I know that we're known for. We don't render anything at real time. Real time is really, really slow in our world, and so we could do, say, 8 different deliverables at the same time,
right,
all way above real time. in order to hit all those things at the same time. And that's where OSD and EXD's power comes from. And that's why all of our end users, whether it's an individual user, all the way up to all, the studios use us, the post houses use us worldwide, is because of the versatility and kind of being ahead of the game when it comes to making sure that your dailies pipelines, again, whether it's you could be a wedding videographer, you could be a nature, documentarian, you can be whatever you want, and the toolkit will work for you to help ensure that you can deliver accurate pictures across the board.
And I think we talked about this briefly. And can you also talk about a little bit about the live viewing, remote monitoring workflows or things like that you may have in this, or is that for transcoder?
Oh no! So we have streaming that is built into all of our products. So On-Set Dailies, Express Dailies, Transcoder. We have the ability to right out of the box stream your dailies or your footage across the board directly out into the Colorfront streaming platform. And what that does is it's a one-to-many, right? So I can live stream this out to the world. I can send email invitations to Ray and Sean and everybody here. And you could click a button. And if we have an application that runs on iOS, tvOS, iPadOS, all things Apple, let's just short form it, and also Windows. And if you have our streaming player application installed, when you press the play button on the invite or join session, you can join in and actually watch me in real time as I'm color correcting the daily. So I could be, Ray, you're the DP, you're on set at lunch, and I'm back at the office and I'm working on your stuff, and I see something weird. I'm like, something doesn't feel right. And this is very typical in a dailies pipeline. When it used to be film, I used to interlace between DPs and the colorist, and the colorist would call me going, dude, something looks wrong. And I was like, okay, let's get on the phone, right? And you're talking through it. Like, it's a little too something, or it's not exposed.
Absolutely. Yeah, it just simplifies it.
Yeah, and now I can stream out in SDR or HDR with reference quality in real time, sub-second delay, and actually talk to you in real time as I'm tweaking it, going, see, do you see what I'm seeing? Like, did something happen with the camera? Was it bumped? Did you mean to shoot it at 5.6? Because I can open it up for you in that real time fashion.
Absolutely.
So then before it's delivered to Frame.io, you know that you're getting the most accurate possible picture.
Great. And Brandon, we have one question on the chat. I think Sean, I think you were gonna.
Yep, I'll bring it back up for you.
Perfect. So Brian's asking, does Frame.io allow an external partner to use the controls for Colorfront to provide their own suggestions for changes?
Now, Steve did answer this in the chat, but I did want to bring it out so that everyone can kind of hear it out loud if they weren't able to see it in the chat.
All right. What did Steve say? Let's see. I'm reading the chat now.
Yeah. So Steve mentioned you would need to run OSD to connect to OSD remotely to be able to use the Colorfront engine.
Correct. And so there are some things that have been discussed over the years to kind of automate this kind of in the back end, where you would upload to Frame.io, and then there would be kind of triggers that you could set up that would trigger an On-Set Dailies that's in the cloud or on-prem to automatically just do the work for you, right? Like, you've set it, but you're not looking at it, right? That's the tricky part. So you can automate it for sure, but the issue is if you're not looking at it, like I said, doing the simple, I'm going to apply a color correction and get the color out the door. Yeah, we can automate that. What you can't automate necessarily is the work that the colorist does. But if there was, something that was the look and you're happy with it, and we could go as far to automatically apply your CDLs. If your CDLs are up in the cloud and your look and everything's there, yes, then we can technically build a hook that would allow you to basically submit a render automatically as the media shows up, kicks off a render, delivers back to you. And so that's 100% possible. At least as an idea, we did some testing for it. We've built some triggers, but still definitely some fine tuning to get done on that.
Great.
Well, I want to jump in because we are actually at time, and I don't want to hold anyone up that's in our queue or watching right now. But I do want to thank the both of you so much for coming on and sharing your knowledge. And I'm really hoping that our audience was able to absorb this knowledge and apply this for future projects. So if you are new to Frame.io and never used our platform before, or if you're looking to at least expand on your current plan offering, scan that QR code located on the screen. It will take you directly to our sales team, where you can inquire about either increasing your plan limits or find out more about what Frame.io can offer to you. Now, again, as I mentioned at the beginning of the session, we do want to hear what you want to learn. If there's content that you're specifically looking for, go ahead and use this QR code to fill out a survey. You can let us know how this session was in particular, but also gives you an opportunity to talk about future sessions that you may want to hear and learn about, because we want to create content that you would want to see. And be sure to check back at the Frame.io Live Hub by visiting Frame.io /live, where we have sessions posted on a regular basis, and we have another color session happening at the end of September. Now, if you heard camera to cloud on this call and you're like, I wonder what this camera to cloud thing is, next week we've got an camera to cloud demo with Atomos. We're going to be talking with them and a few other content creators. So definitely check out the Frame.io Live Hub and sign up for that session. You definitely don't want to miss it. And like I said, once again, thank you to our guests, Brandon and Ray, for joining us and sharing all of their incredible knowledge about Colorfront and color in general. Color is so important, and we need to make sure that we're doing it correctly, and we've got it out there to create our look and feel for our project. So once again, Ray, Brandon, thank you so much for joining us, and have a great day, everyone. We'll see you later.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.